It was a quiet summer afternoon in the small town of Redwood. The air buzzed lazily with the sound of cicadas, and the sun poured down in golden streaks through the oak trees. 12-year-old Ellie Harper kicked at a loose rock on the cracked sidewalk as she walked home from her friend Julie's house. Her sneakers scuffed against the pavement, and her backpack sagged heavily on her shoulders. Ellie's thoughts wandered as she trudged along until she stumbled on something she'd never noticed before. Hidden among overgrown weeds, surrounded by a crumbling circle of mossy stones, was a well. Its stones were damp and dark, and the wooden cover had rotted away, leaving a gaping hole. Curious, Ellie stepped closer and peered down. A faint, cool breeze drifted up, carrying a smell. Earthy but tinged with something sour. "Hello," she called softly, her voice echoing into the depths. She laughed nervously. Who was she talking to? It was just a hole in the ground. That night, Ellie couldn't sleep. She kept thinking about the well, its smell, the endless darkness, the faint breeze. Something about it gnawed at her mind. The next day, she went back. As she approached, her stomach tightened, but she leaned over the edge again. This time, she thought she heard something, a faint whisper. "Hello?" she called again. A long silence followed, then a reply. "Hello, Ellie." Her heart skipped a beat. How did it know her name? She looked around, but no one was there. The voice spoke again, louder this time. "Ellie, don't be afraid." Against her better judgment, she stepped closer. "Who's there?" "I'm a friend," the voice said, soft and soothing. "I've been waiting for someone like you." "What's your name?" Ellie asked. "I don't have one," it replied, "but you can call me Shadow." "Shadow," Ellie repeated. "Okay. What are you?" "A friend," it said again. "I'll keep your secrets. I'll listen to you." Days turned into weeks. Ellie visited the well every afternoon, telling Shadow about her day, her fears, and her dreams. Shadow always listened, its voice kind and patient. Ellie began to think of it as her best friend. She didn't tell anyone about Shadow, not even Julie. But Shadow began to change. One day when Ellie told Shadow about an argument she'd had with Julie, it said, "You don't need her. You have me. I'll never hurt you." Ellie frowned. "But Julie's my best friend." "No," Shadow said sharply. "I'm your best friend." Ellie's stomach knotted. That night she lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. Something about Shadow's tone unsettled her. She decided not to visit the well anymore. The next day, as Ellie walked to school, she felt like she was being watched. She glanced back but saw nothing. At school, she thought she saw a shadow flicker at the edge of her vision. But when she turned, there was nothing there. That night, as she sat at her desk doing homework, she heard a faint whisper. It was coming from her window. "Ellie," it called. "Why are you ignoring me?" She froze. Slowly, she turned her head. The window was open, and outside the yard was dark. But in the shadows, something moved, a shape darker than the night. "Come back to me," the voice said. "I'm your friend." Terrified, Ellie slammed the window shut and locked it. She pulled the curtains tight and huddled under her blanket, her heart pounding. The next day, she decided to end it. She marched to the well after school, her hands trembling but her jaw set. When she reached the clearing, she shouted down into the darkness, "Leave me alone!" The voice that answered was no longer soft. It was harsh and furious, echoing up with a force that made her stumble back. "You can't leave me," it roared. "You're mine." The ground trembled, and the air grew icy cold. Ellie turned and ran, the sound of Shadow's cries chasing her all the way home. For days, Ellie stayed inside, keeping her windows locked and her curtains drawn. But she could still feel Shadow's presence. It was in the rustle of the trees, the creak of the floorboards, the whisper of the wind. It was everywhere. Finally, she told her parents about the well and Shadow. At first, they didn't believe her, but when they saw the fear in her eyes, they agreed to check it out. When they reached the clearing, the well was gone. The stones, the weeds, even the ground it had stood on, all of it had vanished, leaving nothing but an empty patch of dirt. Ellie felt a wave of relief, but unease lingered. Shadow was gone, but not truly gone. Sometimes late at night, she still hears whispers. She pretends not to notice, pulls the covers over her head, and prays they never get louder. Thanks for venturing into the darkness with us at Horror Studio Inc. If our spine-chilling stories sent a shiver down your spine, make sure to like, subscribe, and tap the notification bell so you never miss another tale that lingers in the shadows. Have a terrifying story of your own? Drop it in the comments or send it our way. Your nightmare might just become our next feature. Always remember the shadows are never empty. Stay curious, stay brave, and we'll see you in the next haunting tale.